Yeah, okay, so we're now live on Facebook. So that's with thanks to Bhante Saranapala, and warm greetings to everybody who's come here to the retreat today. So Bhante Ratanasiri kindly gave us permission to hold this. And we come to a retreat like this all with the kind of, with the same purpose in mind. You know? And basically that purpose is that all beings, you know, no matter where they are, no matter what kind of birth they have, whether they're kind of insect, you kind of see these kind of small insects crawling around sometimes in the bathroom, whether they're a kind of bird in the sky, whether they're a kind of person in Africa, whether they're a person here in Canada, whether they're rich or poor, all beings are basically motivated by this desire to find happiness. Excuse me. So I remember when I was young, there was always this kind of philosophical quandary. So actually somebody asked me the other day, you know, how did you become a Buddhist being in Canada? And I was talking with him a bit and said, well, you know, when I was young, there's this tradition in Western philosophy of you know, kind of asking questions, kind of thinking a lot about things. And one of the big questions in Western philosophy traditionally has been, especially religious philosophy, is like, what's the purpose of life? Kind of a big question here. Kind of people show up, and the way the Buddha describes it is, we live for a while. He says when people remember their births, it's this was my name, this was my clan, this was my food, this was my experience of pleasure and pain, this was my death, and then having died, I re-arose here. And so that's the way they sum up an entire lifetime, you know, kind of birth, name, clan, food, pleasure and pain, and then death. You know? So all these kind of things, you know, that's basically what seems to make up a life, isn't it? Kind of, and if that's all there is to life, then what's the point? Why are we here? To just get food, just experience various kinds of pleasure and pain, you know? And have a particular name, have a particular clan, and then pass away. So what I was telling this person was, you know, for a long time, this was always this kind of question maybe in the back of my mind personally when I was young. And remember there was this time this teacher, one of my, I think it was 7th grade, and she asked the question. It's kind of this question that's always around in Western philosophy. So what do you guys think the purpose of life is? You know? And I remember thinking about that. I was like, oh, you know, purpose of life is to be happy. You know, why else are we here? And the teacher's like, no, that's not the right, not the right answer. But anyways, it seemed like the right answer to me. And remember first encountering Buddhism, and this was explicitly the focus. In other words, you know, there's suffering, and there's the causes of suffering. There's the cessation of suffering. There's a path leading to the cessation of suffering. And so this right there is the purpose of life. You know? Doesn't have to be anything higher or more mighty than this. Actually, although this sounds simple, it's very profound. Because whatever people do, whatever their motivations are, wherever people go, any intention they have, this is always the overriding purpose of their intentions, of their goals, of their movements, of whatever type of becoming, whatever person they want to become, don't want to become. It's all for the sake of becoming happy. All for the sake of ending suffering. This is the overriding purpose of people's lives. So the true question is, what is it that really leads to happiness, and what is it that really leads to suffering? So when this question isn't asked, then the blanks get filled in ways that might not necessarily be aware of. So I remember when I was a young man studying, and we would learn about economics, you know? And meditation class often kind of talk about this kind of, you know, with the decline of formal religion, what we have are other philosophies that take their place. And around the time that the West was starting to rise, there was an economic philosopher named Adam Smith. And Adam Smith came up with this idea that basically if we all specialize, you know, in various things, and we can produce more stuff, you know. And so then the official goal behind economic philosophy is what they call, not to give anybody an economics lesson, probably many people here know more than me, but their goal is to what they call kind of maximize scarce resources. In other words, there's a limited amount of stuff that we have, And how can we get it to maximize those resources? So the question is, of course, what does it mean to maximize our scarce resources? And the answer that economic philosophy gives is, we're trying to basically maximize our pleasure. The pleasant feelings that we get through our eyes, pleasant feelings that we get through our nose, the pleasant feelings that we get through our ears, the pleasant feelings that we get through our tongue, through our body, and through our mind, through ideas. Now, the thing about this is that even in economics, they recognize that these kind of pleasures are things that decline when we go out to consume them. So they have this thing, again, kind of talking about economics, I hope nobody falls asleep, but they have this thing called marginal utility, which basically means, not to say, it basically means there's a kind of for example, each burger you eat, we eat one burger, the burger tastes really good, and somebody's like, okay, here, have another burger. Okay, yeah, fine, I'll eat burger number 2. And so people go and eat the second burger. Okay, it tastes a little bit less good. And finally, the person keeps forcing burgers on us. Burger number 3. Okay, this is starting to taste bad, you know? Now, if that person made us eat 4 burgers, they might become our enemy. You know? Like, that's enough burgers. In other words, there's this thing where each thing that we consume through our eyes, through our ears, through our nose, through our tongue, through our body, through our mind, when we consume it, the first time it's good. But the same thing, each time we consume it over and over again, gets less and less pleasant. So then what economic philosophy does is it tries to come up with a system whereby society, the people working in the society, fill the gap. Once the first burger starts tasting bad, what can we switch it out with? Can we switch it out with a movie? Can we switch it out with, a salad? Whatever it might be. And this is the underlying philosophy behind economics, kind of maximizing scarce resources, kind of maximizing pleasure. In other words, this is the answer that economics has for what is our purpose in being here. Our purpose in being here is to consume these various kinds of pleasures. Yeah? Actually, there was one monk, he was joking a lot. He was like, previously we used to be citizens, but now we're consumers. We're just these big gaping mouths. Not to get too down on anything. Actually, the economic system that we have is very nice. It's nice to have an abundance of things, not for people not to be hungry, for people to have enough clothes, to be able to drive hundreds of kilometers. These aren't necessarily bad things. But the thing that happens is that without a kind of overarching philosophy, this becomes the purpose for which people live their life. It's an interesting thing. And because it's unexamined, because it's unspoken that this is what people are looking for, this is what we look for, that philosophy becomes even more powerful. So then people run around, kind of run after the next car, run after the next house, run after the next thing through the eye, run after the next thing through the nose, through the ear, through the tongue, through their body, through their mind. Run after the next idea, whatever it is. Trying to get this kind of pleasure, this happiness from these things. So this is the overarching philosophy, or the overarching reason that we're alive. And of course, it's, these things are pleasant. So the Buddha's teaching is, though, that although these things are pleasant, they're limited. So there is this kind of pleasant feeling that comes from these things. But the tricky thing is, when we live our life with this as our exclusive goal, our life can get pretty depressing. So again, no, I don't want to make anybody depressed. There's kind of lots of good news. But remember, there was this talk by there was this time the Dalai Lama was in India. And I can't remember, there was somebody asked him a question. And he asked him, what do you do about kind of self-hatred? And the Dalai Lama didn't understand what it was. He's like, well, self-hatred. So they had to keep getting his translator to repeat to him, self-hatred. But, what's this? Kind of don't know what self-hatred is. He didn't know. And when the person explained to him what self-hatred was, then kind of Dalai Lama started to cry. It's my kind of understanding. Kind of felt very upset that there was this phenomena of self-hatred that was so widespread in Western countries. Now this phenomena of self-hatred, something like this, can arise when the only reason that we have to live is for these external things. actually it starts to seem like not too noble of a way to live. When we're just explicitly living for the next car, the next house. We're explicitly living for the sake of getting these things from other people, from other countries, whatever it may be. It can lead to these kind of feelings that are not too good. So the Buddha's solution is different. Although these things exist, although we have to interact with them, there's happinesses that can come from things that are more wholesome. Happinesses that come, rather than consuming, happinesses that come from producing. So in other words, it's not something that we rush out to and get. It's like this big stimulus, like big movie, big sounds. Oh, I'm in the movie. It's something that starts small and builds. It's like growing a garden. So I remember kind of my grandfather, he used to grow this garden, in his house there. Had this kind of big plot of land, and every time you go, he'd have garlic. Kind of like tons of garlic to give you plenty of garlic for everybody. And you could see what he was up to. When he went to his garden, he would plant seeds. Sometimes he would, I think, take seeds from things from the previous year, and he would put them in the ground. And when he put those seeds in the ground, after that, he would hoe the ground, make sure that there were no weeds in the ground. Try to make sure, I guess, that no animals ate the little sprouts that were coming up, and he would water them. And after a long time, this kind of ground that seemed bare, eventually something would sprout. Became obvious that there was something there. And after watering it for longer, after a longer period of time of consistently doing these things, this sprout would grow. Kind of would become larger. Until it was obvious, okay, something's growing here. And he continued to cultivate that. Eventually that sprout bears fruit. And that fruit was something that he could harvest and share around. Kind of wasn't necessarily something he had to consume. He produced it through this kind of slow process of growth, slow process of cultivation. But when he produced it, there was an abundance. Actually, kind of too much for him to have. And you get to the point, okay, I think I have enough garlic. Don't need any more garlic. Remember this one time I was living at a Zen temple, and I had to water the garden. That was my job. So I would go watering this garden, and it was a kind of decent sized garden, nothing too huge. But my job was to water it every night. There was kind of tomato plants and like some squash, and I'd never watered this garden before. And I figured, okay, well, be enough for the people at the temple. Anyways, when these tomato plants and kale kind of grew, it was so much food that you couldn't use it. Kind of the people at the temple was just huge. I had no idea how much fruit a tomato plant produced. It was quite a lot of tomatoes there, But anyways, all of this came about through the same process, this process of cultivation, or this process of production. Kind of when I first started watering the plants, there was nothing there. After several months, they grew, and finally they sprouted and bore fruit. This kind of fruit that you could consume. And so in the same way, although there are these kind of pleasant feelings that come from consumption, these pleasant feelings that come from consumption are things that tend to diminish the more we consume them. There's also these kind of pleasant feelings or happiness that come from production. The tricky thing about this kind of production is it's not something we notice right away. First time we sit down, first time we meditate. Actually, sometimes go to Bhante Saranapala's meditation class. He's kind of joking with people. He's like, okay, people, they come to, when we come to meditate, think that we're going to meditate. When we sit down, our mind will be very blissful. And then what happens? Kind of sit down and suddenly, we're back. We were 5 years old, and maybe that kid stole our candy. And we're just as angry at that kid when we were 5. Right now we're as angry as we were then when we were 5. Or our mind kind of shoots off to the future, and we're thinking about that excellent thing that's going to happen next week, and we're absorbed in it, and suddenly that thing we're thinking about changes. And all of a sudden it's this worry about a future. We sit down to meditate, and these are the things we encounter. In other words, if we have never cultivated, we haven't cultivated our mind, we haven't trained our mind, this is actually what our mind is like. It's what's to be expected. But it's not something to get down about. It's just the way that it works. When we want to grow something, we have to cultivate it. We have to put in time, slowly by slowly, bit by bit, to take out the weeds. So when we sit down to meditate, this is what we learn to do. We learn to eliminate the bad thoughts that come into our mind. Thoughts of greed, thoughts of hatred, thoughts of delusion, thoughts of worry, thoughts of anxiety, thoughts of fear. They come into the mind when we meditate, and we learn to develop various techniques to get them out. It's the same way that a gardener, when things are growing in their garden, when weeds are growing in their garden, they learn various ways to eliminate them. Some of them that are very shallow, you can just take out with a hoe. You kind of chop, 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 out they go, you know? Other ones, they look very small, but they have deep roots. So not only do you have to chop off the top, you have to dig, 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 and remove the root. So when we do this kind of thing, eventually the ground becomes prepared. We can plant seeds. When there's not a lot of weeds in our garden, we can put in seeds that can grow. In the same way, when we sit down to meditate, we gradually clear out these unwholesome thoughts. We can plant good thoughts in their place. So this is actually a very important thing, because what it means is there's no person who we really are. In other words, sometimes we can think of ourselves, I'm this person who's very outgoing. I'm a person who's shy. I'm a person who's often angry. I'm a person who's got these good capabilities, these good qualities, these bad qualities. And when we define ourselves in this way, we actually limit ourselves. What it means is if we're a shy person, we can't become somebody who's outgoing, because we're that kind of person. But actually, the Buddha's teachings are different. Whatever type of quality there is, it arises according to causes and conditions. We can plant the seeds for whatever wholesome quality we desire. And so long as we water those seeds, so long as we care for them, one day they'll grow. So actually, this is the reason this is the name that they give in Pali for meditation is bhavana. So we use this word meditation, which actually comes from the Catholic tradition, and is is a good word. We need to use English words. The connotations of bhavana, though, are slightly different than the connotations of the word meditation. What bhavana actually means is developing. So what it means, bhava in Pali means existing. These kind of states of existence are things that we learn to develop. We learn to take them on. We learn to become them. So what we do when we meditate, we're learning to become something. We're learning to cultivate. We're learning to get rid of the weeds. We're learning to plant good seeds. And we're learning to water those seeds, so that one day those seeds can grow. So what that means is no worries if this is our first meditation retreat. Not to worry if sit down and feel pain in the legs, if sit down and the mind is wandering all over the place, if sit down and all kinds of things can come up during a meditation retreat. Actually, sometimes it's amazing. Things that we haven't thought of for years, suddenly they're there. Sometimes happy things we haven't thought of for years, they're there. And it's nothing to worry about. When these things come up, if they're good or bad, if they're good, we try to cultivate them. If they're bad, we try to learn various ways to eliminate them. And what we learn to do is bring our mind over and over again back to a meditation topic. The same way, over and over again, over and over again. So we'll be going through some instructions on this. So that's one thing, is that we're learning to cultivate wholesome qualities here through bhavana, through development. And the other word that people might have heard quite often is this word kind of mindfulness. So in the West, at the present time, mindfulness, the general meaning, is kind of this present moment awareness that's open and focused. But actually the meaning of it in the Buddhist scriptures is to be able to keep something in mind. So we can be in the present moment doing all kinds of really bad things. Being very mindful, doing something very bad. And if we do those things even better because we're paying really close attention to them, then they'll bear bad fruits. It's like being really careful about cultivating a weed. Kind of very carefully watering the weed, very carefully planting the weed. That weed's going to grow really well, So mindfulness, sati, doesn't only require this aspect of just being aware in the present moment, it also requires this aspect of discernment or intelligence. So this is also something we learn to cultivate in our meditation. When a thought comes up in our mind, is this a thought that's helpful or is this a thought that's unhelpful? If it's unhelpful, we learn to eliminate it and come back to our meditation practice. If it's helpful, then we learn to cultivate it. And this is what mindfulness means. It means being able to keep something in mind. So this is what we're going to be training to do today. We're going to be training to try to prepare the bed of our garden. Going to be training to try to eliminate unwholesome qualities. This gets the soil prepared. We're going to be training to try to plant good seeds, to plant wholesome qualities, to plant seeds of morality, not killing anything, not lying, not stealing, being faithful in one's relationships, not taking intoxicants. We're going to try to learn to plant seeds of generosity, being open-handed and giving to the people around us, to ourselves. And we're going to try to learn to plant seeds of bhavana, these seeds of meditation, where we actually learn to cultivate our mind. We learn to sit down and focus. When we plant these kind of seeds, it gives a different direction to our life. When we have these kind of qualities, the cultivation of our garden in this way as our focus, it changes our underlying search for happiness from the search to being a consumer to the search for how to be a good producer, for the search to be how to be a good gardener, for the search to how to cultivate our mind well. So the nice thing about this search is that it's something that's good. It's good in the beginning when we eliminate these bad thoughts, whatever bad thoughts of hatred, bad thoughts of greed, bad thoughts of delusion. We eliminate these even a little bit. This is a good thing. This brings happiness even to that little extent. When we eliminate them to a middle degree, it brings happiness to a middle extent. And when we eliminate them completely, it brings complete happiness. So this is something that's always worth doing. And when we cultivate our mind in this way, we turn our focus to being the producer, learning to cultivate our mind. All the various things, the nice thing about this is that all the various things in our life that used to pull us around and jerk us around, they tend to do so less. It's like somebody who, reached out to a car, say in the parking lot, and grabbed onto it. One of the cars here. Now, if that car got up and started moving, if we don't let go of that car, we're going with it, right? It's the same thing that happens with all the various external things that we can seek happiness and pleasure in. Of course, it's not terrible to do this, But the thing about them is when we grab onto these things, when they go up, we go up with them, Something we like gets better, we're so happy. When they go down, we go down with them. Something we really like, we really care about, it changes, we get so sad, And in this way, the world spins around on itself. It's like, the image they give in the canon is like somebody who puts a big sail up, Like a ship, they put the sail up in the wind, and if the wind blows straight, then the ship goes straight. If the wind blows east, it goes east. If it goes west, it goes west. If it goes south, it goes south. As long as the sail's up, whatever way the wind blows, that's the way we're going. So what we learn to do when we learn to focus on being the producer, we learn to lower our sail. We learn to kind of get our own motor inside the boat rather than having a sail up that's outside. The benefit of this is that we then get to choose what direction our ship goes in. We can point it wherever we like. So this is what we learn to do when we train our mind over and over again. As we sit down to meditate, we'll notice the mind runs off somewhere. Okay, bring it right back to the meditation object. Runs off to the past, back to the meditation object. Off to the future, back to the meditation object. And there's various techniques we can also learn. If the mind runs off to thoughts of hatred, counter those. The mind runs off to thoughts of greed, can counter those and bring it back to the meditation object. When we do this over and over again, when we eliminate the weeds in our garden, when we plant good seeds, the day comes when these seeds sprout, when these seeds bear fruit. Now, when these seeds bear fruit, this is something that's obvious to whoever cultivates them. And it brings kind of happiness into a person's life that makes them independent. In other words, at these points, when our meditation practice bears fruit, we don't need, it's nice, it's always good to have people to teach us. But we don't need somebody to teach us that these things are true. We know they're true. It's like somebody who cultivates a garden, plants the seeds grow, they bite into the fruit, and they taste the fruit. Once that person tastes the fruit of their efforts, there's nothing that can convince them that these efforts don't bear fruit. And this is what it means to have faith in the Buddha's teachings, this kind of conviction. It's a conviction that arises through direct experience. When we develop these things, when our meditation practice bears fruit in this way, we become a little bit more what the Buddha calls independent in his teachings. In other words, we don't need somebody at that point so much to tell us, the Buddha's teachings are true. This is the true way that leads to happiness. Not the consumption of external things, but through the cultivation of wholesome qualities in our own mind and through the elimination of our own bad qualities. We see this for ourselves. At that point, no matter how much difficulty we've had in establishing our garden, once we taste the fruit, all the difficulty's forgotten. Somehow it doesn't matter anymore, We already know what we're going to get. And this is the benefit of the Buddha's teachings. This is why it's called something that's, I think, the ehipasiko, to be experienced individually by the wise for themselves. Each of us on this retreat are here together, but we're also here alone. We're also here alone with our own minds. We're also here alone with our own meditation practice. We're here alone with our own garden. And what that means is that it's up to us, each individually for ourselves, to make that garden a good place to grow, to make our mind a safe place to be. A person at the front like me, this is the role I'm filling today. Oftentimes I'm right at the back. But a person who's talking about meditation, that's all they can do. They can talk about it to the people. But when we sit down to meditate, it's all up to us. It's going to be us there bringing our mind back. It's going to be us cultivating our garden. It's going to be us who sees the shoots once they start. It's going to be us who sees them once they grow. And ideally, it's going to be us who tastes the fruit that comes from this kind of effort. And once we taste this fruit, it can give a new direction to our life if it's the first time we've ever tasted it. At that point, we can know this is a type of happiness that's much more nourishing, much more satisfying than any type of happiness I've had before. This is the right way to go. The right start to a journey. This is a journey that starts in happiness, leads to happiness in the middle, and at the end leads to a complete happiness that never changes. Hard to believe? Maybe. But it's something that we can know directly for ourselves. And at that point, it won't be hard to believe at all. Okay? So those are just some thoughts for the opening of the retreat. So we can actually start with a little bit of meditation. The way that it works, actually maybe next time there's a retreat, can try to start. Actually, monks have to finish eating before noon. So most of the meditation on this retreat is actually going to be in the afternoon. Be doing some today, and then there'll be times to go individually. But we'll meditate till about 10. And then Irfan will give us some instructions on lunch setup, which will be at 11. And we'll take it from there. Okay? So what we can do to meditate first is to get our body into position. So we can lean forward a bit, arch the spine of our back. Actually, I think I'm pretty good here. We can arch the spine of our back. And I'll show a little trick. I actually learned this from a Zen teacher. She was a yoga teacher. And sometimes do this. This is a nice way to line up the spine. And can just take our hands and put them above our head like this, keeping them parallel with our shoulders. Can turn them palms outwards. And then bring them down, 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 past the shoulders, down, 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 past the belly button, and into our lap. And that can help to line the body up. And with our body in position like this, we can look about 3 feet in front of us and close our eyes. And we can focus in on the breath. Can know when it's coming in and know when it's going out. If we breathe in a long breath, can just know I'm breathing in a long breath. If we breathe in a short breath, can just know I'm breathing in a short breath. And can focus in on the sensations of breath at the tip of the nose. And if notice any patterns of tension or tightness around the nose or the face, can just let those relax. And when breathing in and out from the tip of the nose, it can be helpful to change our perception of the breath. Sometimes can almost imagine the breath as if it's in front and one is watching it. But instead can change perception so that it's almost like one's right in the center of the breath. Almost like standing under a waterfall. So on the in-breath, one can be totally immersed by the breath. On the out-breath, one can be totally immersed by the breath. And we can try to make mindfulness as continuous as possible. Trying to be aware all the way through the in-breath. As the in-breath turns to the out-breath. All the way through the out-breath. And as the out-breath turns back into the in-breath again. And we can shift our attention a bit. This time up to the area between the eyebrows. And if we notice any patterns of tension or tightness between the eyebrows, can just let those relax. And can practice breathing in and out from this area between the eyebrows. And when breathing in and out from this area between the eyebrows, it can be good to change one's perception of the breath. So that it's not just air that one's pulling in and out of the lungs, but it's a kind of energy that's all around and coursing through one's body. And it's possible to pull it into and out of any part of the body one might like. Through skin, through skull, almost as if there was a little mouth there between the eyebrows, pulling in breath energy from all directions. And can shift attention again a bit. This time up to the crown of the head. And this is just the area where if one were to pull a string from the last vertebrae in the spine out the top of one's head, this is roughly where the string would exit. So, kind of at the top of the head in the center. And if we notice any patterns of tension or tightness at the crown of the head, you can just let those relax. And can practice breathing in and out from this area at the crown of the head. And when breathing in and out from the crown of the head, it can be helpful to change one's perception of the breath so that it's not just air that one's pulling in and out of the lungs, but it's a kind of energy that's all around and coursing through one's body. And it's possible to pull it into and out of any part of the body one might like. Through skin, through skull, almost as if there was a little mouth there at the crown of the head, pulling in breath energy from all directions. And can shift attention again. This time back down to the area between the eyebrows. And can follow the same steps again there. So if we notice any patterns of tension or tightness in this area between the eyebrows, you can just let those relax. And can practice breathing in and out from this area between the eyebrows, almost as if there was a little mouth there, pulling in breath energy from all directions. And can shift attention again. This time back down to the tip of the nose. And can follow the same steps again there. So if we notice any patterns of tension or tightness around the nose or the face, can just let those relax. And can practice breathing in and out from this area at the tip of the nose, pulling in breath energy from all directions. And if the mind wanders off to the past or the future, you can just gently bring it back to the present moment, to the breath. And before we finish meditating for this session, can spread thoughts of goodwill, wishing may all beings everywhere be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can make our mind infinite, can make it unbounded, all the way to the ends of the universe and beyond, in every dimension. May all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. Okay, so we can open our eyes. I gotta get the bell. I think the bell's back there. So, so now is time. I think it's time for lunch prep. From about now until I think it's 12:30, we're meeting back here again. From now until about 12:30, there's going to be stuff going on for lunch, all that, which Irfan can explain. But there's also going to be a fair bit of kind of free time, kind of like downtime, where not too much is happening. And this is a kind of very good chance to cultivate our meditation practice on our own. So this is actually one of the most important things, is, we come together like as a group like this, but also good to develop this kind of ability to motivate oneself, to practice meditation, even if things are a bit noisy, even if things are going on, because actually this is what it's like most of the time. Kind of once we leave the temple, there's noise, there's people doing stuff, but we can cultivate our mind in the midst of that. So whenever it is that people are finished lunch, if instead of going downstairs, if it goes straight upstairs, there's an attic level, and people are welcome to do walking meditation there. I'll explain the way for the kind of basic method of walking meditation. Also welcome to come and do walking meditation in here, kind of between the rows of cushions. And I'm not sure what it'll be like outside. You're welcome to go outside. Usually we do kind of, people like to do maybe 20 paces of walking meditation, but can also do it, in a very short area if there's lots of people. So no worries if just 5 paces, can just walk 5 paces and turn around. And the goal of all this is that throughout this entire day, we want to try to keep our mind on our meditation object. So not letting our mind wander out to other things. That's the case whether we're eating, whether we're, getting up, whether we're walking, whatever we're doing, trying to keep our mind on our breath. And so if you have a meditation object other than the breath that you're used to cultivating, please feel free to do that. If it's your first time at a meditation retreat or meditating, then can just try to keep the mind on the in and out breaths at the tip of the nose, or trying to keep the mind with the in and out breaths, feeling it through the whole body. And basically just letting that be the basis of our focus, the way that we kind of relate to the world. So this is what's actually the name for some of these things, is a satipatthana, which means a frame of reference. And so what we learn to do when we're cultivating meditation throughout all these various postures, we learn to have our meditation practice as our frame of reference. In other words, usually the frame of reference tends to be external. It tends to be kind of the world outside. Did this thing that I do, did it work out or not? Did this person like me or not? Is this tasty or not tasty? But when we change our frame of reference, it's more, how does this affect my breath? How does this affect the way that my mind is staying with the breath? In other words, in our relations with the external world on this retreat, we learn to use this breath as the frame of reference. Everything that we come in contact with, is this making my breath more calm? Is this making my breath more coarse? And in this way, we learn a lot about manipulating causes and conditions in our meditation practice. Sometimes when people get angry, when they get anxious, whatever it is, the kind of canary in the coal mine is actually the breath. Kind of when these things happen, our breathing changes. When we're anxious, our breathing changes, can become, very shallow. Our body becomes very tight. When we're angry, our breathing changes. When we're very relaxed and happy, our breathing changes. When we learn to have our breath as the focus, as our frame of reference, rather than these external feelings, we learn to see how our breath changes with each of these emotions. And when we learn about this, we learn how to change our breath to change our emotions. In other words, we learn how to manipulate some of the external feelings that we usually contact. We become more in the driver's seat. And so when angry thoughts come up, when anxious thoughts come up, when happy thoughts come up, how does it change our breath? This becomes our frame of reference. And next time we get angry, the next time we get sad, whatever it is, how can I change my breathing? The amazing thing is that sometimes change our breathing to a nice, slow, calm pattern, those emotions eventually die away. Kind of our breathing continues to be tight or whatever it is, those emotions can amplify. So in this way, we kind of learn about cause and effect through keeping our mind on the breath. So to do this, the important thing is actually to try to engage in very, very little talking. So this is one of the good things to do on a retreat usually, and it's reasonable and good to do in our usual interactions with the world. We have to be kind of very engaged with people. Kind of when people come into the room, we have to kind of smile at them, say hello, and it's reasonable, right? Kind of that's a reasonable thing to do. But on the retreat, we actually change that mode a bit. This is a kind of safe place to keep our focus solely on developing our mind. And what that means is that our usual social interactions, they change a bit. So no need, if people come into the room, no need to engage with them. No need to talk with them. Doesn't mean that we don't like them, that we're angry at them. When the retreat ends, then can say hello, But this is the time to keep quiet so that we can remain focused on our meditation object, so that we can learn about what's going on in our mind. Kind of the Buddha gives this simile of kind of a glass of water. And often this glass of water kind of gets various things put into it, like red dye, blue dye, sometimes has maybe water plants growing in it, sometimes it's bubbling and boiling. When all these things are happening, we can't see the reflection, our own reflection in the water. But when we take these kind of dye out, we let the water cool down, it's not boiling, we remove the plants, then we can see our own reflection. So in the same way, when we don't engage in external speech, our focus is just totally on our own mind, then the water, the sediments, all these various things that are stirring up our mind, they settle down. We come to get a clearer picture of what the cause and effect relationships are like in our mind. And this is where we learn to develop a skill in our meditation practice that goes outside of the retreat. So this is kind of very important. And if you need to talk, if people need to for a good reason, like, where's the bathroom? Or, obviously people are arranging lunch, dana, then need to talk at that time, then, please feel free. I mean, I won't be going around policing anybody, I'm not going to be, don't talk, But this is one of these kind of things where we were talking about earlier, where we see the results for ourselves or we don't. In other words, this is an opportunity for ourselves that we can take. So kind of on the last retreat we held here, I noticed there were some people, and during the breaks they would come into the meditation hall and they would talk to each other. And then during walking meditation, I saw them talking to each other. And then partway through the retreat, they left. Okay, this is how it works. If we kind of keep our mind stirred up, then our meditation practice won't go smoothly, And I didn't say anything to them. I mean, I won't judge them. I actually don't know what was going on with them. They might have had a family emergency, which is fine, And, also if people get to talking, no need to feel angry at them or anything. But we also each learn to take care of ourselves. And in taking care of ourselves in this way, kind of seizing the opportunity, we learn to help other people, help the people around us, So this is one of the things, kind of trying to keep speech to a minimum. No need to even look at people. We can keep, actually for monks, the instruction the Buddha gives when we're in the cities is to look 3 feet in front of us, kind of not even to look up. So we can also do this during the retreat when it's not necessary, when we're not cooking. Instead of looking around, looking directly at people, unless we have neck problems. I've got a kind of neck problem, so sometimes I have to kind of look around. But unless we have neck problems, then we can actually just keep our focus 3 feet in front of us. And what that does is it helps us avoid eye contact with other people, so that we feel like we might need to engage with them, or we wonder if, is this person angry at me? Are they happy? They have these kind of funny things called the Vipassana vendettas, or Vipassana, other things, where people are on a retreat and through kind of various nonverbal eye contacts, they develop all these ideas about what other people on the retreat are thinking about them. Usually turns out to be something really funny. And then they go up and talk to them after the retreat, and actually they're a totally different person than they imagined. But in any event, we can just keep our gaze just 3 feet on the ground. That can be a good practice to do. Unless need to look up. This is a practice that's optional. If you want to look around, no problem. And in this way, we learn to take care of our meditation practice during the times when we're not formally sitting together.